Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today, I'm joined by Hannah Goodman, Chairwoman of the Libertarian Party of Colorado, or LPCO for short. Well, Hannah, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Yes, thank you once again for having me on.
Well, Hannah, the LPCO has made a historic announcement to place Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the Colorado ballot as the presidential nominee. The LPCO had previously announced that the National Libertarian Party's presidential ticket, Chase Oliver and Mike Termott, was not going to be placed on the Colorado ballot by the LPCO. So why isn't the LPCO going to nominate the Oliver and Termott ticket?
Well, it really doesn't reflect the values of Colorado libertarians. It was a very contentious national convention. It took 7 rounds to get Mr. Oliver and Termott through. Well, I don't know how many rounds it took Termott, but anyway, I wasn't there for that. I was fortunately in bed. Um, So he was not popular in general. It took some finagling of moving delegates around and some what would be considered maybe a little bit of dirty politics on the convention floor, though legally within bounds, moving delegates from one presidential candidate to the other. And so that right there shows you that overall Chase didn't win in a landslide victory. He really doesn't necessarily even represent libertarians across the nation. And I was told by his campaign that he's broadly libertarian, whatever that means. So in Colorado, we had some serious issues with his takes on COVID. We feel that he was very much in alignment with the regime during COVID and all of that tyranny. There's some issues that we fundamentally disagree on. We believe it is a NAP violation. The NAP is the non-aggression principle. You will not use you will not use violence to achieve political ends, basically. So we view puberty blockers and chemical castrations for children as NAP violations because it physically alters their body and they don't necessarily have the ability to consent to these procedures. He is against sex changing children, but the chemical castration and the puberty blockers is once again, shilling for the regime. The cronies and corporations that control our government are pushing this not only through our schools, but through pop culture, through all types of legislation. We're seeing it here in Colorado, most especially with the fact that our children's medical records are sealed when they're 12 years of age from parental view. Our schools on the Front Range, many of them have adopted very progressive policies and stances, and there's been name change bills. So there's all of these types of things. This is a battleground, and to shill for the regime is not what libertarians are fighting for. We're fighting for the rights of children to be children and make these decisions when they're older and of age. So Mr. Oliver would not consent that that was a NAP violation. And that ultimately is what turned the board off of him being placed on our presidential ticket.
Wow, yeah. I think a lot of people might be shocked to hear those things, and it makes a lot of sense, really, because the Libertarian Party is all about providing this alternative to the regime, as you said, this alternative to the duopoly, kind of differentiating a libertarian from the Democrat Republican on some really core issues and core beliefs, right? So, the COVID issue, for sure, a non-starter, I think, for libertarians in Colorado. I mean, we saw how devastating that was to our community here. And so to have a presidential candidate who was kind of duped into that and kind of went in line and followed along with what he was told to do is disgraceful, really. I mean, how can any libertarian support that? And then, of course, the going after children and their inability to consent, it's been a massive issue here in Colorado as well. So definitely applaud the board for making those tough decisions to say, hey, listen, this is a step too far. This is a candidate who just doesn't represent the values of Colorado libertarians. So really appreciate you explaining that to people.
And also with the Termont ticket, we have a discrepancy. There seems to be some funny business with the national convention and a number of delegates that were seated that should not have been. And so this undermines the Termont ticket. And it's not enough to just be like, oh, well, we're not going to put him on. I think initially the idea was, well, let's see what the national committee decides to do before we proceed forward with this. But also, Termont is a qualified immunity enjoyer. So a libertarian ex-cop who's sitting free right now because of qualified immunity. And that, of course, is the antithesis of what libertarians believe. So these are huge, questionable candidates, and especially for Colorado. So that's the issues with the Termont ticket.
Gotcha. Well, that brings us up to yesterday when the board announced that RFK Jr. is going to be the presidential candidate in Colorado for the LPCO. So, why is the LPCO putting RFK Jr. on the ballot in Colorado?
They asked me to pursue different avenues for who would be a good fit for the ticket of Colorado. And would we just put no one on there? That was also a very real option. And it would be very libertarian, quite frankly, to have NODA. No other option, essentially. Um, but you can't put NODA on. And we looked at a few other ideas that just didn't sit right. We were presented with RFK, who came to the national convention. So he's a sustaining member of the party. He is a registered libertarian. Um, with that, the people that were working to get him the nomination at national reached out to board members, and they asked me to pursue looking at that. I was able to meet with the Kennedy campaign, and I was able to discuss potential what that would look like. Why is this a good option? The Colorado strategy is all about using the swing vote and leveraging the swing vote. Colorado's not necessarily a swing state. We're pretty locked up Democratic majority. So the idea is we could essentially leverage this to create a swing state situation and become real viable players in the national level. I'm tired of living under a Democratic monopoly. And how are we going to break this up? And creating a swing vote essentially is a declaration of war on the Democratic Party of Colorado by libertarians. They have subsequently ignored all offers that my board and myself have made over the past year to try to negotiate with them, as well as we negotiated with the GOP. Many people may not be aware, but we offered a similar deal with the Democratic Party as we did the GOP. If they presented strong liberty candidates, we would move out of those races, and they ignored us. It fell on deaf ears. Well, it's going to be a lot harder to ignore the Libertarian Party going forward. And I probably bested them for $0. No one here is getting paid. So that's an interesting note. The Democrats hold a massive amount of majority because they've bought and paid for it. So it's interesting an underdog third party can come in and rattle their cage as strongly as we've just done for $0, mind you, $0. And I'm really proud of that specifically. But we also were able to secure a presidential Liberty Pledge signature from the RFK campaign. I have that. I have the actual copy. The physical copy is being mailed to me so that it may be placed in party archives. Regardless of how this turns out, this is history of the party. And so to have that, regardless of how this turns out and how people may feel about it, we will have this piece of history in the LPCO archives. And I think that's incredible. This is the first time we've become relevant in the presidential election, right? And some people are satisfied to sit on the sidelines with 3%. And hey, I'm satisfied to sit on the sidelines with 3%, so long as I'm swinging it around the arena, showing people that's what I got. And so I think too often people are scared of this term spoiler. And what it is it's actually a swing vote and it's very powerful in politics. And so the people that have been sitting on the sidelines, just like, okay, well, we'll do our own thing and we'll just run our own candidate. And we don't care, guys. It's just good that we showed up. That's not politics and that's not advancing liberty. And as David Nolan has said, as one of the founders of the party, the goal is not the party, the goal is liberty. So, how are we going to do this and what are we going to do to achieve it? I think we have a better shot of liberty through the RFK campaign than we do with Trump or Biden. And Chase Oliver is completely irrelevant as far as actual politicking on the national level. And that's essentially what the board feels and why they chose to act the way that they did. I did not vote and I cautioned them both for and against. I presented them all the arguments of all of the avenues that would be open to them after this decision. And so we've picked a course and now we're going to stay it and I'm going to see it through regardless of where that ends up.
Wow. So you started answering the question by saying they were asking for alternatives, or they were asking for, and you, by that you just mean the board, just to clarify for
Yes.
people out there.
Yes, the board.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting to see this Colorado strategy definitely emerging as this unique thing in libertarian politics, or in politics in general. Definitely a continuation of the pledge with the Republican Party and becoming more influential overall, right? I really like what you said about kind of engaging with the duopoly in a way, engaging with the Democratic base, the Democratic voters, and kind of their sphere of influence with this RFK nomination, as well as what the LPCO has done with the GOP in Colorado before. So, I mean, it can't be denied that the LPCO is definitely a more powerful, influential, or more of a force in Colorado politics than it's really ever been. I mean, talk about disruptive and really trying to get in there and shake up what's going on.
We're definitely doing that.
Well, I mean, I think, the Colorado Democrats must be scrambling, in my opinion. They've pushed just this last couple weeks, they've pushed their progressive wing out of the party during the primary, and the Democrats have failed to pass a Gaza ceasefire resolution, alienating a lot of their base. Additionally, add to that to the horrible performance of Joe Biden at the debate. And now the Democratic voters in Colorado have an opportunity to cast their vote for somebody that maybe is a little bit more palatable. Obviously, a lot of these Democrats weren't going to vote for Trump. They weren't necessarily going to vote for Chase Oliver. A lot of them don't want to necessarily vote for Biden, but now they have another option here. So I can't imagine what's going on in the Colorado Democratic headquarters right now.
I hope they're scrambling and I'll teach them to ignore me. That's the one thing that you can't do is ignore me and expect me to go away. This isn't necessarily my action, but I'm going to write it. And I'm probably the only chairwoman with enough gumption to actually sit on the horse and ride it till the end. And that's exactly what I intend to do. So it would behoove the Democratic Party to not be so condescending to the power of the swing vote in the third party. And perhaps this will be a nice little taste of that medicine for them.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it over and over again that people are sick and tired of the two-party system. People are looking for viable alternatives. The Libertarian Party has been providing that alternative for a long time now, but not always with the best candidates, not always with the best strategy. But now here we have a strategy that actually does disrupt this two-party system and does create this totally different alternative that people can choose to say, hey, listen, we're tired of the status quo. We want something different.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and I think it's interesting too. It's part of this larger trend of the Libertarian Party just gaining some influence nationwide. I mean, I got to think with podcasts and the internet culture and all of this, the Libertarian Party has probably more reach than it's ever had in its 50-year history. But additionally, to see Donald Trump go to the Libertarian National Convention in Washington D.C. back in May, RFK showing up. Obviously, there's a lot of outreach to the Libertarian Party, to the Libertarian movement, because it's a growing movement, it's a growing community, and there's a lot of people there who are dissatisfied with the system and are very active and want something more. So it's interesting to see us as part of that larger narrative nationwide as well.
This is bold actions like these are how you gain relevancy. When you start gaining relevancy, that's when you start growing your voter base. From that voter base, you grow your membership base. And so often, many times, many libertarians have it backwards. They want to grow their membership and expect that to grow their voter base, when in fact the opposite is true. So this strategy, I think the board really hopes that it's going to grow that voter base and give people a taste for voting libertarian. And think about the benefits for candidates down ballot. If we have such a highly recognized name on our presidential ticket, people are going to stop and look at the rest of the ticket with L's behind their name. That's how that's going to happen. Do we want libertarians elected or do we not? Because if we want libertarians elected, we're going to actually have to apply some political strategy. That's how this works. Many people may think it's not. They may think it's rainbows and butterflies. I don't know what they think. But as far as I've ever seen, the strategy for getting libertarians realistic is highly unrealistic. And so imagine if Kennedy comes to Colorado and does a joint campaign with down ballot candidates. All the press is watching RFK. Are they watching libertarian candidates? Yeah, a little bit here in Colorado, a little bit. Thanks to my strategy of the pledge and all of that. Yeah, we do have some press attention. I was invited to a debate. It's very rare for a libertarian to be invited to a two-party debate. I was on a debate stage. They did let me speak, right? Let her speak. Okay, that was me. I was her. So we do have this, but how do we get more? That's the idea is I want to get my libertarians elected down ballot. Why? Because it's going to advance liberty. And if the Republicans aren't going to show up and run liberty candidates and nominate them and do all these, well, then I'll do it. And I am. And so now we are in this position that potentially my down ballot candidates are going to see some benefit from this. And that was another thing the board thought of and really like the idea of. How do we continually get exposure on our down ballot candidates? The presidential ticket, most of the board, including myself, just thinks it's dumb. You don't see the president every day. You can't go bother him and be like, I hate the job that you're doing. Sure, you can write him, right? But is he going to read it? No. It's your down ballot candidates that actually hold more power in your lives, in your day to day life. And you can actually go find these people. You can go find your county commissioner. You can go, I see my city councilman and my county commissioners at the grocery store or wherever, church. Not everyone lives in such a small community like I do, but you can go to your county commissioner hearings. You can go to your city council meetings. You can set up meetings with these people. So these are the people that really decide what liberty is like in your everyday life. How do we get libertarians elected there? This potentially could be one way by getting name recognition through somebody with high name recognition. And some people would say that's whoring the party out, but I just disagree. It's called political strategy.
Well, I got to think too, Colorado being a blue state, with so much Democratic super majority at the legislature and a lot of the metro area, why not, pull in a Liberty adjacent Democrat, the closest the closest thing the Democrats have to a libertarian, bring him into Colorado, pull votes away from the Democratic Party regular, kind of chip away at their power base and provide a viable alternative that's a little bit more liberty leaning. I think about the pledge and what the Libertarian Party's done with the GOP to kind of shift the GOP to make them a little bit more pro liberty, a little bit more libertarian. And I could see this kind of having the same effect in terms of pulling those Democrats a little bit more towards the liberty side and saying, hey, listen, now Colorado Democrat voters have a little bit more liberty perspective. So maybe the Democratic Party needs to kind of shift their perspective a little bit, shift their candidates, their outlook and policies to be a little bit more pro liberty, because Colorado is this unique place where people want a little bit more freedom, a little bit more liberty than some of the other states out east or out west of us. So I could see that kind of being a little bit of an interesting dynamic here as well. But just briefly, we only have a couple minutes left. What what would you say to the detractors? I mean, RFK Jr. has a terrible record on the Second Amendment. He's got some really bad, horrendous, pro EPA, pro government regulatory agency kind of policy positions. What would you say to the detractors there that say, "Hey, listen, you're trading out Chase because you don't like his policies, but RFK doesn't necessarily have overall the best policies as well." What would you say to that?
So that's the interesting effect that the Libertarian Party has the potential to impact on this campaign. By doing this, it gives us a seat at the table for discussing these issues and getting and gaining some ground there. I want everyone to realize his campaign manager, I spoke with her. I really like her. She's got a very interesting story. Working for the regime gave her a very interesting perspective on the Second Amendment. And her perspective is this: she was in Burma through some revolutions in the late 2010s. And she helped freedom fighters gain their liberty there. Recently, I think in 2021, that pro-liberty group was ousted, and they've been pushed into these hills where they are now manufacturing guns by printing them. They're using 3D printers to print guns in the jungle to take their country back. She said she has friends, like what they do with the women there is they round them up and they push them by at gunpoint through fields of landmines, and the soldiers take bets on who's going to win, like who's going to make it the furthest before being blown to smithereens, right? So she's seeing firsthand the reason why a second amendment is there. It is to protect you from your government, and she is a huge vocal advocate in that campaign for good gun policy, which would be like no gun policy. And the fact that she's talking about how they're 3D printing guns in the jungle to fight for their freedom, that right there tells you exactly where she stands on that type of thing, on ghost guns, for instance. We have the opportunity here to really sit down and effectively mitigate with the RFK campaign. What are libertarian policies? Why are these better than the ones that you're trying to push? And how does this actually benefit everyone? Because I think at the end of the day, ultimately, he wants to benefit people. He's into environment, right? He cleans up the environment. So he sees the problems that are created by the cronies and the regime and the impact on the environment, but never being really exposed to libertarian ideas as far as like private property rights and how this would impact navigating these situations he's seen. I think this is a huge opportunity for an education campaign to bring the ideas of libertarianism to everyone, not just him. Because if we can get him to espouse them, and we will be able to get him to espouse them, we're going to be really pushing that needle for liberty forward. All it takes is conversations. That's the one thing libertarians are the worst at, is having conversations. No, we want to melt down, throw fits, rage quit, shut down anything that we don't want to hear, and push it completely away and not be at the table having conversations like rational adults. But I would argue you find that probably in all parties to some extent. And so opening conversations is how we advance liberty and how we start really getting our ideas out there and marketing them to everyone. And so, yeah, there is some issues there, but I also have a signed pledge, and in that has a plank about gun rights. So I think that we're going to see a pivot from original stances to things that I align with us as libertarians better.
Wow. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, having that kind of influence over the presidential candidate, over RFK Jr., over his campaign, to say, "Hey, listen, you got to kind of be a little bit better on some of these pro-liberty issues that are important to the people here in Colorado," as kind of part of that bargain and part of that conversation. Like you said, yeah, if you're unwilling to have that conversation, you're unwilling to sit down and talk to them, then yeah, you're not making any progress. Things stay the same as they've always been, but now there's a seat at the table. Now there's a conversation going and influence all the way around. And I thought it was interesting too, because you earlier you talked about, hey, Chase was, you know, going along with the COVID regime, kind of just, doing everything they said, kind of just bought into the whole COVID narrative. And RFK Jr. is definitely the opposite of that. I mean, he's got the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, really going after Fauci and really going after the whole COVID narrative. And I think that's something that can't be ignored, that can't be overlooked. I think a lot of people like myself were hoping 2022 elections would be kind of a referendum on COVID, those horrific policies that were so detrimental to people across Colorado and the United States. And it didn't really materialize. So many of those same people who push these bad policies on Colorado are still in power now, like our authoritarian governor, for example. So hopefully, this also provides what RFK I think can provide is kind of this referendum on the COVID regime, the COVID narrative, and say, hey, listen, are you tired? Are you sick? Are you angry about what they did to us? Maybe you have a loved one who had died alone in the hospital, or somebody who lost their job or their business. Well, hey, here's somebody who was fighting back. Here's somebody who's going to actually be that candidate that represents the pushback against the COVID narrative. And then the last point I'd like to make is just that intelligence agencies. I think I'm sure I'm not alone in saying probably the biggest threat to the American people is these three-letter agencies in Washington D.C. The intelligence agencies have done just a horrible job overseas and in our own country. Just wreaking havoc and terror on the people of America and in Colorado. So RFK definitely represents a threat, a pushback against these intelligence agencies who his family suffered so much at the hands of these people. So, those are two big flags in the cap, if you ask me, in terms of reasons that libertarians should get some support behind RFK. So just thoughts there. But Hannah, any parting words here before we end this?
Yes, I would just definitely like to re-highlight, Chase has said he's a medical freedom advocate. But meanwhile, he's posted things like anti-vaxxers are stupid. And I'm an anti-vaxxer. So surely I'm not stupid. Um, but here we have RFK, who has been fighting the vaccine regime almost as long as I have. I've been in the fight with that longer than he has, quite frankly. And that right there just shows you the difference, right? You hold up vaccines, you hold up the COVID regime, you hold up this whole transing the kids issue, and you see exactly where the both of them fall. And I mean, Chase's campaign is broadly libertarian, but I would also argue that RFK's campaign is also broadly libertarian. And in Colorado, we saw that moderates really took the primaries. And so I think we have an effective way to gain relevancy and votes here in Colorado by presenting them with that moderate they so desire. After we finally got these actual communists out of our state legislature, um, we're seeing people genuinely want moderate because I believe people actually think moderate is liberty. So let's help them get as much liberty as we can.
Awesome. Well, appreciate your time this morning, Hannah. I'll get this information out there to people. And what are you asking for support from people out there? People can donate to the LPCO.
Yes, yes, we always need money. So, and if you're hearing this message for the first time and you're interested in the Libertarian Party of Colorado, you want to know more about what we've got going on. Maybe you're interested in a membership. All of that information is on our website, and we definitely want as many donations as we can. If you like what we're doing to challenge the establishment, that is across the nation at this point, head to lpcolorado.org/donate. lpcolorado.org is going to show you everything else you need to know about what we have going on here in Colorado and educate you on what libertarianism is.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Hannah. Appreciate your time. Best wishes and look forward to seeing how this plays out.
Thank you. I'm going to need all the good luck I can get.
All right. Take care.